Hello, this is Chris Hammond at christalk.com. Welcome back to our DNN 9 video series. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the web forms module project that we created in the last video in the series. Now, in order to make it through the video, we have a couple prerequisites here. We assume that you already have DNN running at dnndev.me. You have our DNN project templates installed, and you've already gone through the project creation in our last video. So in this video, we're going to open up Visual Studio 2017 as an administrator. Then we're going to open the solution, and we'll go through that solution overview. So let me go ahead and switch over here to my virtual machine where I have everything up and running. So here in Internet Explorer, I'll go ahead and refresh to reload my local DNN dev website. While I'm waiting for that to occur, I'll go ahead and run Visual Studio 2017 here. Now it's prompting me because I'm running it in administrator mode, so it does make me authorize that. So the Visual Studio is opening here. We'll go ahead and open up the solution for the project we created in that last video. Now it should be found under the recent option once that fully loads here. If you don't find that, you can always go into the file and then open file or project solution options within the file menu. Now I have it listed here as the sample module SLN, so I'm going to go ahead and open up that solution file. Now the module that we created was using the C# DAO2 project template, and that gives us a module in which we can simply create a list of tasks or a list of items within the module. So if we switch back over here to our browser, and we go ahead and log into our local DNN website. I'm going to log in with the host or the super user account. You could create an administrator account if you'd like to use that instead of the host or super user account. What we'll find here, we actually have a modules page and then the sample module page underneath of that. That's where I created our module that we're going to be looking at here today. Now let's take a look at what the module does functionally. So we'll go ahead and click on the edit mode within the persona bar here in DNN 9. And if we go to our two different modules that we have on the page, we can see one of those is an HTML module. The second one is our sample module. Let me go ahead and just delete that HTML module to get that out of the way here. Now within our sample module, we have a pencil icon there, and we have the choice to add an item. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create an item here real quick. And we'll go ahead and give it a title, give it a description. And I'll go ahead and duplicate that description just to make it a little bit longer here. Now you can also choose an assigned user. In this case, we don't have any users within our local DNN site except for the host or the super user account. So we'll go ahead and attempt to save it without the user, and we can see that that actually fails. So in this video, we'll go ahead and fix that problem here real quick. First thing we're going to do is go into the manage option. We're going to go into users. We're going to add a new user here. We're just going to call this sample user. Give them a username of sample user. We're not going to give them a random password. We'll go ahead and define a password. That way, if we need to, we can log in as that user. Go ahead and save this user, which we've just created. And now I want to go ahead and assign it a security role. So I'm going to go ahead and make this user an administrator here within the site. So if I just type admin to search, I can select the administrator's role, click add, and that will add our user to the administrator's role. Now if we go ahead and reload this page, and we can once again go into that pencil icon within our module and choose add. Now we have an assigned user available to us. And we'll go ahead and create our first item here within the sample module. So that is an item, and our module is simply that. It gives us the ability to list off items. So let's go ahead and create a second item just so we can see the list here. and save. And we'll see we have 2 items listed here within our module. Now, within the module, we can also edit or delete an item. If we go ahead and click on edit, it'll just take us to that same interface with our content populated for the item that we're editing. And in addition to that, within the module, we have some module settings that we can find underneath the gear icon, clicking on the settings option. And within those settings, what we'll find is a 4th tab here called sample module settings. And right now in the module, we don't have any settings exposed to us, but when we get into the solution, we'll see that we can expose some settings and add those here on this particular tab or this view within the module settings. So if there's anything custom that we want our module to do, maybe create a number or a page size for the listing of items, we could create a module setting for that. So we'll switch back over here to Visual Studio now and take a look at what this module actually is. So within the solution for this module, we have a simple project called sample module. So there's a single project here within the solution. The way we created the module and the solution in the last video, they are both in the same directory. They're in the desktop modules sample module directory. Now from here, we have all of our usual Visual Studio project options. We have properties here in which we have an assembly info file that allows us to change the version number of our module. We have references. Now, specific to DNN, we have a .NET Nuke, a .NET Nuke.web utility reference. These allow us to reference DNN within our local DNN website. And if we go down to the properties below, we can see that the path to those references are the C websites dnndev.me bin folder. And that's where we have the local instance of .NET Nuke running. Now, after the kind of usual suspects here within our project, we have some additional folders. We have an app local resources folder. This houses the localized resource files for our module. Now, in this case, if we go into the view.ascx.resx file, we can see that we have a couple of localized strings here. If we go into edit.ascx.resx, we have a few more localized strings. These resource files are used by the ASCX files loaded down below. So in the root of the project, we have an edit.ascx file. And you'll see there's a corresponding edit.ascx.resx file. Same thing with settings.ascx and view.ascx. Now in future videos, we'll talk more about the localization files within DNN. After that, we have a build scripts folder. In the build scripts folder, we have module package.targets and a MS-built community tasks.targets. These 2 files are utilized in order for us to compile our module and package our module in release mode. This makes it very easy to distribute your modules. After that, we have some components folders. We have a feature controller, an item.cs, and an item controller. The feature controller has a large number of lines of code that are actually commented out. And what you'll find here are examples of interfaces that you can utilize within DNN. Actually, none of these are commented out, but in some of my module project templates, you'll find them commented out. These interfaces allow you to support functionality within DNN, such as the search functionality for indexing modules and their content. We have iPortable and iUpgradable. iPortable is an import and export tool within your modules in which you can create and consume content when you create templates within DNN. After that, we have a basic item.cs file, an item class. This controls our database table, the table name, sample module _items. Has a primary key of item ID. And then it has properties on our item class. So every item within our module here has an item ID, a name, a description, that user ID that we saw, and some of the properties we didn't see when we created an item. A module ID, created by user ID, last modified by ID, and then the dates associated with the creation and the updates. So this is just a very basic object that we're going to have in order to create and save objects within our database. From there, we have the item controller, which is utilized to interact with those objects. The actual creation of an object is in here called create item. You call that method by passing in an item object. By doing so, it utilizes the Petapoco DAL2 interfaces within DNN to actually insert that item into the database. We don't actually have to write any SQL in order to add an item into our database. We just use this repository.insert, passing in our object of an item. We can also delete an item based on an item ID and a module ID, or simply based on an item object. From there, we can get a list of items. We can get a single item, and we can update an item. So all of our interacting with the database is done through this item controller class. From there, we have a documentation folder. I'd encourage you to take a look at the documentation folder. It does have some useful information on how to get started within your modules and the templates here. Once you're familiar with that, though, you're going to come in and you're going to delete that file. You don't need the documentation folder. That's just some leftover information from the templates. And then after that, we have a providers folder. Now, the providers folder does have a SQL script in it. If we navigate down from providers to data providers to SQL data provider, what you'll find there is a .SQL data provider file. And it's labeled 00.00.01. That's going to be the first version of our module. Within this SQL data provider file, what we have is the SQL script in order to create the table for our items. So within this, there's a simple SQL create table call for a module, or a table, called sample module underscore items, with item ID, name, description, user ID, module ID, all of those properties that we saw within the item.cs file. Now, in addition to that, we have some tokens in here, database owner and object qualifier. Those are DNN specific tokens that will be utilized. We'll talk about those in future videos in our series. So we'll go ahead and close the SQL data provider file there. And now we'll move into our files in the root of the project here. We'll start actually at the bottom. So we're going to take a look at the view.ascx file. Now this is a view.ascx, or a user control. This user control inherits from a code, or a class, called sample module.view. Now, if you expand on the right side, view.ascx, you'll find view.ascx.cs. Now the name of the class in here is view. So that ASCX file references the code behind file with the equivalent .cs file. Now within this ASCX file, we have a very basic ASP repeater object. This repeater object has a name called item list. It's utilized to display a list of items within our module. We have a header template which opens an unordered list, has a class around that. And then the item template here is the repeater for each individual item in our collection. So what this will do is it will list off each item with a list item and then an H3 tag surrounding the title or the name of the item. After that, we have a label for the description, and then we have a panel called P&L admin, in which we have an edit link and a delete link. Now this particular panel is visible only if you have administrative rights on the module, so that you can edit or delete an existing item in the list. So let's take a look at the code behind here for this particular page. And it's a pretty simple code behind. What happens here on the page load is it goes out and it gets a new instance of the item controller class. With that, it calls the get items method on that class, passing in the current module ID. Now, a module ID identifies an instance of a module on a page within DNN. So we're passing that module ID to the get items call. The get items method will return a list of items for our module. We're then setting that as the data source on our repeater list and then binding that data source on the list. Now, if there happens to be an error within the loading of the page here, we do have that wrapped in a try catch. That catch is calling a system.exception, and it's passing that to a DNN exceptions class with a method called process module load exception. That will take any error that occurs while trying to load up that item controller or the items list And if it throws an error, it'll catch that. It'll then log it within DNN, and it will determine if it should display the error or not, or the error details or not. If you're logged in as a host or a super user account, it will display more details than it will if you're just a regular administrator or even just a site visitor. Now after that, within the class, we have our data bound event for our repeater. And basically this will come through and it looks to see for each of the items that are being bound to the repeater, checks if it's an item or an alternating item, and then it's going to go ahead and populate the links to edit or delete that particular item. So it checks to set the hyperlink. If you have the ability to, first it looks for each of the items. So there's a delete link and an edit link. Then it looks for the panel P&L admin. If it finds all of those and you have edit permissions and you're in edit mode within DNN, it's then going to display that panel. It's then going to set an argument on the delete command and set the link for delete to be enabled. We'll also set the link for edit to be enabled and the visibility. The edit control itself has a hyperlink, utilizes a method here within DNN called edit URL. That particular command takes a number of different things. The first two things we're passing in are empty strings. Then we pass in a control name or control key called edit, and then any parameters. So we're basically telling DNN, load the edit control for this module, and then pass in the item ID of the item that we're trying to edit. We also add a confirm delete option, a dialog. So if someone does click on the delete button, it will confirm that they want to delete that item. Otherwise, we go in and we set the visibility on the panel admin just to be false, just in case. And then finally from there we have a on item command here. So basically when an item gets bound, it will, an event occurs. When they click on the edit link, it'll come in and try to get the redirect for that edit link here. Same thing if you click on the delete, it will then get an item controller class or instance of that class. It will then call the delete item method on that class. And once complete, it will redirect back to the same page you're currently on. Now finally, after that, we have one more section in the view control, and that is the module actions. That allows us to add module actions, and the module actions were that pencil that we saw for the ability to add an item within our module. So we need to add something to the module action collection in order to be able to add an item to our page, and we do that by passing in a new action. So that is our view control. It does most of the work here within our module. If we go ahead and take a look at the edit control, edit.ascx, we'll find here the edit control has some more HTML. It has a DNN specific label control called controls/label control.ascx. And within there, we have a couple of different divs to control layout here within our module. But what we end up finding within the module is the ability to define the name of our item, a description for our item, and then a drop-down list of users that we can assign to our item. From there, we have a submit button and a cancel button. Both of those have click events that we'll take a look at in the code behind. After that, we do have some JavaScript here on the page that controls some of the expand and collapse functionality that we have within the module. It's just sample. For this module, it's really overkill, but it's good sample code for you to see there. Now in the code behind for the edit control, if we go ahead and expand and navigate into that code behind, in the page load event, first thing we do is we check to see if the current request is a postback or not. If it is not, then we're going to come in here and we get a list of the users within our DNN portal. We set that list to the DDL assigned user dropdown. We're setting a text field and a value field for that drop-down list, and then we're binding that data to the drop-down list. That provides us a list of users that we can select. Now you can see here it's just calling user controller. That's a DNN class dot get users, and then it passes what's known as a portal ID. The portal ID is the identifier of the website within DNN. It is possible within an instance of DNN to run multiple websites, each with their own unique domain name or even just subdirectories. So each website alone has a unique portal ID. So in this case, we're getting a list of all users, not just administrators, within this particular portal for now. Now after that, we go into some logic to see, are we actually editing an existing item? Does the item ID exist? Is it greater than 0? If so, then we're going to go load up the information for that item and populate our text fields and our drop-down list with the appropriate values. If we go into our submit click event down below, basically the submit click event is going to create an instance of an item and an item controller. If we are editing an existing item, it will first go get the details of that item from the database. Then it will take the new details that we've set within our form and populate those values. So we're setting the item name based on the text name text box. Item description from the text description text box. The last modified by user ID is the current user who's logged in. When was it last modified? So we're setting it with a datetime.now. And then we're setting the assigned user ID to that drop-down list. Now, if we're working with a new item, instead of actually editing an existing one, we do, for the most part, exactly the same thing. We just don't go get an existing item from the database first. From there, we do set last modified, date, the user ID, and the current module ID. Now we decide, are we updating an existing item, calling update item, or are we creating a new one, calling the create item function on the item controller class. Now once the edit is done or the update is done, we then redirect back to the web page where we have our module and we can save our changes. Now the last thing we're going to dive into here real quick in this video is the settings.ascx file. Now in the settings.ascx file, what you'll find is a view control, or an ASCX file here, that has some code commented out. Now this particular code allows us to place module settings into the control, and then in the code behind we can save or read from those module settings. So there's some samples here. If you want to use this file, just go ahead and remove the two comments at the top here, and then remove the comment at the bottom. Now in the code behind for the settings control, there is also some commented out information. If we expand this particular control, or the ASCX.cs file, in this case, you will not find a page load function within the page. What you'll find is a load settings method and an update settings method. Now, why do you find those two instead of page load? Well, this particular control, the settings control, inherits from a class called sample module settings base. That is a file, 2 files up within our solution, in which we have a base class that we're inheriting from in DNN called module setting base. We'll talk more details about that and another class called portal module base in later videos in our series. But for now, what you can see is we have a method here for load settings. Inside of there, we have some settings that are commented out. You can remove the comments here, and it gives you the ability to read from a setting and to set that value to a text box for setting number 1 and setting number 2. After that, we have an update settings section down below that has some commented out sections for storing those settings within a method called update module setting or update tab module setting. So we'll talk more about both of those in future videos as we dive into some more of the intricacies of settings within modules in DNN. And we do want to talk about a couple more files here real quick I forgot to mention within the solution. important within your module, and probably one of the most important things within your module in order to actually install the module is this file called samplemodule.dnn. Now that'll be sample module being whatever the module name was that you created, but the .dnn extension. This is the manifest file within DNN. This manifest file tells DNN everything DNN needs to know about your module when you go through the installation process. We'll make a whole video just about this particular file and all the intricacies of the .dnn file. This file references a couple of other files. License.txt is a simple text file. It has some HTML in it, which you can provide anything you want to have within your license that will be displayed within the module during the installation process. And the same goes for release notes.txt. This is a release notes file, also HTML, that will be displayed during the installation process. All right, so this has been one of the longest videos we've created about DNN. Apologies it went so long, but I really didn't want to break this up into multiple videos because the content kind of all ties together. Hopefully you found this to be a good overview of the project. There's a lot to a DNN module, though it's pretty simple. What you get when you create a module with my project template, you get a module right out of the box. So the best way to learn it is really just to start diving in and playing with things, making changes. We'll start doing that in some of the next videos in our DNN video series. This is Chris Hammond with chrisdoc.com. Thanks for watching the video.